Hello, my name is Cherionna Sills, and I'm speaking to you from lovely Devon in southwest England, though I'm from Canada originally. And I'm looking forward to this conference from Just Being. My work primarily is in three different areas, which are all very related and overlap. One is biodynamic craniosacral therapy or craniosacral biodynamics. Another is prenatal and birth therapy and psychology. So it's the psychology of our experience in the womb and around the time of birth and how that affects us throughout our lives. It's a very great passion for me, comes into everything else I do. And the third area is Continuum, which it's another great passion. They're all passions for me. Continuum is a practice I consider a mindfulness practice, a mindful movement practice that was developed by my dear mentor, Emily Conrad, for almost 50 years before she sadly passed away in 2014. And Continuum involves using different kinds of breaths and sounding that we usually direct into the tissues of our bodies, movement, and mindful awareness. And I'll speak a bit more about it because that's what I'll be presenting for this conference. But just to give you a bit about my background, I also have a background as an occupational therapist, and I was massage therapist and body worker for many years. I went back to school to get a master's degree in somatic psychotherapy, which is body-based psychotherapy. And that really began or deepened a healing process in me that was very important and led me to get a PhD in pre and perinatal psychology. And so I've been working with those and teaching those and doing supervision and mentoring around those for many years. And the way that I work with them is very much a mindful, presence-centered kind of work. So I really feel that in a way, the essence of healing needs to be around presence, being oriented to present time, having compassion, developing compassion for ourselves, who we were back then, whatever might have happened to us, who we are now, and whoever has been in our lives and is in our lives. So it's all around mindful presence. And that comes into all of these ways of working. These days, I'm very focused on prenatal and birth therapy and teaching that. I train people in that. And one major aspect of that is about being able to be in present time, and from that place, meet and be with the little one that we were. Can we be aware of how it was back then? And can we be aware of or sense into what that little one might need? And as adults in present time, offer that to the little one that we were. So you can probably hear the compassion there that's so important. Can we be compassionate towards who we were and who we are, how we are now? That's so influenced by how we were back then. A lot of what's affected my feeling so strongly about mindful presence and compassion being essential to healing is having had years of painful experience of cathartic trauma therapies, and finding that I developed a lot of insight, but they weren't necessarily healing for me. They tended to bring up a lot of shock and pain that would take a long time to recover from. And I was so grateful when I started to come across therapies that were so much gentler in working with trauma, like craniosacral biodynamics, which was bringing in ways of working with trauma that were influenced by Peter Levine and somatic experiencing, and some other things. And also include a very strong orientation to health, that there's always health in our systems. It comes out of osteopathy. That's a basic osteopathic principle. And so that helped me remember that there's always health here. There's a great intelligence that has guided each of us into becoming who we are and meeting whatever conditions we've met. And so we can appreciate that, and we can have compassion for however we dealt with it, whatever it was. Then I also ran into the wonderful work of Ray Castellino, who sadly passed away last year, but was a pioneer in the field of prenatal and birth therapy, and especially working with babies and children and families. And I had the great fortune to be able to work with him very closely for years, and work with him in his clinic, and not only take his training, but assist him in many of his workshops and trainings and things, and very influenced by his work, which makes safety and presence absolutely essential to the healing process. And then running into Emily Conrad and Continuum, which helped me really deepen in my understanding and ability to embody these teachings. So Continuum is, Emily used to describe it as an inquiry into our fluid nature. We're originally made up of fluid. Our fluid can become compressed, coalesced when we meet difficult conditions. And so in Continuum, we practice slowing down, settling, being in mindful presence with whatever arises, being curious, asking, what else? What else might be here? What else is present? What else might I be aware of? Rather than going into the whole story of it. And so the presentation that I'm doing, a little workshop that I'm doing for the conference, is called Continuum, Mindful Inquiry Through Fluid Movement. And I hope you'll come and join me for that. In my experience over the years, Continuum can really support us in settling, relaxing, melting whatever we're holding in our bodies, and coming into, you see my body, a more fluidic way of being. We practice being mindful of what happens in our bodies, in our feelings, as we make a sound, as we take a breath, as our body moves. Can we slow it down so we can be aware of every bit of the movement? And some magical things happen in the process. This kind of fluid being, it's really about just being, because we are fluid, kind of coming back to our natural way of being, I see as being so important in these days when there's so much stress in our world. Things like climate change, pandemic, we have a lot to deal with, and just the speed of electronics. I'm grateful for them, that they enable us to communicate with each other across the world like this, but they also speed us up, and we're not designed for that. We are encountering incredibly unnatural and profound challenges these days in our world for our systems. It puts great stress on our system. What we find is that Continuum helps us to be able to be more resilient and more creative, so that we can meet these stresses in new and creative ways. Continuum, we practice orienting to what's new, what's different, what's unfamiliar, what isn't habit, so that I come out of just my same old habitual way of being, and I can actually meet what's arising. So incredibly helpful for what we're all needing to meet these days. So I invite you to join me in the exploration. I look forward to meeting you then. Thank you.